Greetings, and welcome to CIBER Focus, your source for timely international business information. My name is Jimmy Bettcher, and our guest today is Dr. Paul Marr. Dr. Marr is a professor emeritus of the Kelley School of Business, and now professor of business and coordinator of academic outreach at the CEU Business School in Budapest. Dr. Marr, welcome.
Hello, Jimmy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. You've taught at Kelley, you taught at the Kelley School for a number of years, and you're now at the Central European Business School. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about CEU?
Yes, I'd be glad to. Central European University was established by George Soros, and I think those in the business audience would know George Soros. Some other people might not know much about him. So let me say first things about the university, then about Soros, and why he established this university. Central European University is, I guess, the premier school of higher education in Central and Eastern Europe. Happens to be located in Budapest, but it's not a Hungarian. It's an American school, completely taught in English. Only MA and PhD students learn there, and they have well over 1,000 students. They come from all over the world, but primarily from Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, but also increasingly from emerging economies. Now, Mr. George Soros, I got to give a little bit of background of him to lead up to why he established CEU. He is born in Hungary in 1930, so he's now just past 80. When a communist came, his father arranged him to go to England. Then he washed dishes and learned and so on. And he finished the school, London School of Economics, where he had a course with Karl Popper, the famous philosopher. He then, his first job was to work for an American trader. And he had a career. He has a triple career. He is became one of the wealthiest men in the world. The Quantum Fund that he established about 40 years ago, the best performing fund ever. And he has written many books. He is all over the map in the world. And he established Central European University practically on the day that the Berlin Wall fell, in order to provide a truthful, objective Western type of education for the future leaders of that part of the world. I remember that a colleague of mine here at Indiana University, Mr. Yelovich, was professor of history, did a study of the textbooks, high school textbooks, of East European countries, and they all had mutually contradictory information. There's a lot of animosity in that part of the world. So part of the reason for establishing this university is to provide objective views of history, political science, sociology, and so on, for the future leaders and of this part of the world. And it is an outstanding university. In addition to all the humanities and social sciences, it has 3 professional schools: the School of Business, where I am, School of Law, and also School of Public Policy. So, Indiana University, by the way, I just talked to Patrick O'Mara, our Dean of International Affairs and Vice President of International Affairs. There are a lot of common projects with Mr. Soros and Indiana University and so on. So that's Central European University, located in Budapest, but it is basically serves students from all over the world, primarily from Central East Europe, former Soviet Union.
And how long have you been at CEU?
At CEU, I've been there 10 years. 10 years. I left here after 25 years in 2000. And since then, I've been serving as academic dean for 3 terms, and then now ordinary professor in charge of external outreach and so on.
So speaking from your very wide breadth of experience both in higher education here in the United States as well as in Europe, could you share a few comparisons between what higher education looks like there versus here?
I think a basic difference, maybe two or three basic differences I would identify. One, the Europeans generally are much more steeped in mathematics. Mathematics is more taught and more widespread than in the United States. The second one is that education tends to be more pragmatic in the United States and more theoretical in Europe. The companies that are coming to hire, talk to them who are all over Europe hiring, they say people don't have much practical experience, all theoretical learning. So these are, I think, important things. And the third thing is that American higher education, much more participatory. Students, business school especially and so on, are asked to contribute. We always say that an MBA student is as much a resource to teach other MBAs as the instructors are. But in Europe generally, and we are an exception at Central European University, Europe generally, students are quiet and they don't speak in class, and they don't share their views. It's more or less listening to what the professors are saying.
Very interesting. Having spent 10 years at a university that's certainly well in tune with what the economic environment in Central and Eastern Europe is, I was wondering if you could speak to what you think are some of the biggest changes going on in Eastern Europe in terms of the economy and business world.
Yes. I think the most important, of course, is this great recession of 2008, 2010 that really affected the East European countries in major ways. I think they all had sort of three types of shocks. One, they all had to depend on exports. So as West Europe and the world economy turned down, their exports declined substantially. And the second thing is all the East European countries have been large net exporters of capital. Part of their growth model was to import capital in various forms. And because of the Great Recession, capital flows stopped. In many cases, they got reversed, leading to credit crunches and so on. So those are the most important. But one thing that in East Europe worked better than in West Europe or the United States, the banks were not in such huge difficulties. Partly because many banks are owned by West European banks, but they didn't do the kind of high-risk lending that American banks and some West European banks are noted for. Now, of course, this is a broad generalization about Eastern Europe, but things differ country by country. Generally speaking, the countries that followed more responsible economic fiscal policies in the 10 years before this Great Recession, and countries where the inflow of foreign funds went into the right sectors rather than wrong sectors, managed this Great Recession much better, and some countries much worse. But that's generally what I said is true for all.
Yeah, well, so now that we're kind of emerging from the Great Recession, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that businesses face in Eastern Europe?
Yes. I think I see sort of two things. One, East Europe is very much tied to Western Europe. So to the extent that West European economies are not doing well and are sort of lagging behind many other parts of the world, the prospects for East Europe to catch up are diminished. And the second thing, which I think is coming, and it's not only for East Europe, but for, I think interest rates are going to rise. Real interest rates are going to rise. And it's no small part due to the huge sovereign debts all over the world. And as interest rates will rise, that will create additional difficulties. So being tied to Western Europe and a concern about higher real rates of interest are the major concerns.
On the flip side, what do you see as the biggest opportunities in Eastern Europe today?
Okay, the biggest opportunities, I would say two things. One, infrastructure. Infrastructure still lags behind quite a bit, so there are good opportunities to help develop infrastructure, and they need foreign participation for that. The other one is that they are highly trained people generally in Eastern Europe, especially East Central Europe. And engineers, architects, IT professionals, and so on are a small fraction of the cost of what they would cost in Western Europe or in the United States. And there are a lot of success stories and still opportunities to hire or to work as a joint venture some of these well-trained professional people whose costs are only a fraction of what West European costs or U.S. costs would be.
So seizing upon an opportunity like that, what advice would you have for, let's say, an Indiana business person that might be interested in investing in Eastern Europe or getting involved in a JV, as you had mentioned, or something of that nature, and maybe some advice specifically in Hungary as well?
Yes. I think first thing is I would get in contact with the local bilateral U.S. Hungarian, U.S. Czech, U.S. Slovak, and so on Chamber of Commerce. They are typically among the most experienced in what's going on, what are the opportunities. They can share a lot of experiences of how to operate in that particular country. So that would be my first contact. So even before I would go to the official foreign investment or foreign trade of the local country, I would go to these bilateral chambers of commerce. And then I say either infrastructure or looking at, for example, many IT. Hungary especially is extremely strong in IT. And so there would be very good opportunities either in joint venture or to hire some people to do IT kind of software and these kind of programs. I just want to mention that even in manufacturing, Flextronics is not an American company. It's a partly American, but also Singapore and so on. It has a huge operations in Hungary, repairing the most up-to-date equipment, IT, computers, telephones, what have you, in several big plants in Hungary. Again, because the IT expertise is so good, and you need that to repair.
Certainly.
So it's partly manufacturing and partly IT. And I think in these areas there are really great opportunities.
Well, that's fantastic. Dr. Marr, thank you so much for joining us
Very good,
today.
good.
We really, really appreciate you joining us, and certainly appreciate the valuable insights you've offered. And it's always a pleasure to have you back in Bloomington.
Thank you
as
very
well.
much, Jimmy. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you learned something about the important international and entrepreneurial work of the Kelley School of Business. If you have topics that you'd like to discuss in future cyber focuses, please contact the Center for International Business Education and Research here at the Kelley School. Thank you.